Maria wiped down the last table of her shift at Romano's Italian restaurant, her feet aching from the 12-hour day. The small family restaurant had been her workplace for 3 years, ever since she moved to the city from her hometown. She needed this job desperately to support her younger brother's college education back home. The evening rush had been particularly brutal. Table after table of demanding customers, complicated orders, and the constant pressure from Mr. Romano, the restaurant owner, who seemed to find fault with everything she did. Tony Romano was a short, stocky man in his 50s with a permanent scowl and a voice that could cut through steel when he was angry. "Maria, table 7 is still waiting for their dessert," Tony barked from behind the counter, his face red with frustration. "How many times do I have to tell you to move faster?" Maria hurried to the dessert station, balancing 3 plates of tiramisu on her tray. She had been working non-stop since morning, covering for another waitress who had called in sick. Her hands trembled slightly from exhaustion as she approached table 7, where a well-dressed elderly man sat alone reading a newspaper. The customer looked up as she approached. He had silver hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and wore an expensive navy suit. Despite his refined appearance, there was something about him that commanded respect. He smiled warmly at Maria. "Thank you, my dear," he said softly as she placed the tiramisu in front of him. His voice carried a slight Italian accent. "You've been working very hard tonight. I've been watching." Maria felt a flutter of nervousness. Had she made mistakes? "I hope everything has been satisfactory, sir." "More than satisfactory," the man replied. "You remind me of my own daughter when she was your age. Hard-working, dedicated. What's your name?" "Maria, sir. Maria Santos." "Beautiful name. I'm Vincent." He extended his hand, which she shook briefly. His grip was firm but gentle. "Tell me, Maria, do you enjoy working here?" Before Maria could answer, Tony's voice boomed across the restaurant. "Maria, stop chatting and get back to work. The kitchen is a mess and needs cleaning before you leave." Maria's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Excuse me, sir. I have to go." Vincent nodded understandingly, but his kind expression had shifted slightly. His eyes followed Maria as she hurried toward the kitchen, and then they fixed on Tony Romano with a look that would have chilled the restaurant owner to his bones if he had noticed. In the kitchen, Maria found chaos. Dirty dishes were piled high, the floor was slick with grease, and the industrial stove was covered with sauce stains. She rolled up her sleeves and began the tedious work of cleaning. It would take at least another hour, which meant she would miss her bus home and have to walk the 8 blocks to her small apartment. As she scrubbed the dishes, she could hear Tony in the dining room, laughing loudly with some regular customers. He was telling jokes and buying them drinks, playing the role of the charming host while she did all the dirty work in the back. Around 11 o'clock, most customers had left. Vincent remained at his table, slowly finishing his coffee and occasionally glancing toward the kitchen. Tony had noticed the well-dressed customer lingering and assumed he was wealthy. He kept refilling Vincent's coffee cup personally, trying to make a good impression. "Anything else I can get you, sir?" Tony asked with his best smile. "Perhaps a complimentary drink? We have excellent wine." "I'm quite content, thank you," Vincent replied politely. "Just enjoying the atmosphere of your establishment." Tony beamed with pride, not noticing the subtle way Vincent's words could be taken in different ways. Maria finally emerged from the kitchen, exhausted and covered in dish soap stains. Her uniform was wrinkled, her hair had escaped from its ponytail, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She gathered her purse and jacket from behind the counter, ready to face the long walk home. "Maria!" Tony's voice stopped her at the door. "Did you remember to clean the coffee machine?" Her heart sank. She had forgotten about the coffee machine. "I'm sorry, Mr. Romano. I can do it now." "Of course you forgot," Tony said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just like you forgot to refill the salt shakers yesterday, and just like you forgot to wipe down the menus last week." Maria felt tears beginning to form in her eyes, but she fought them back. She couldn't afford to lose this job, no matter how unfairly Tony treated her. "I'll clean the coffee machine right away." "You know what your problem is, Maria," Tony continued, his voice getting louder. Several remaining customers turned to look. "You don't pay attention. You think you can just coast through your job without caring about the details." Vincent set down his coffee cup and watched the scene unfold. His expression remained calm, but his jaw tightened slightly. "I do care about my job, Mr. Romano," Maria said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "I work very hard." "Work hard?" Tony laughed bitterly. "You call moving like a snail working hard? You call forgetting half your duties working hard? I've got news for you, sweetheart. There are 100 girls who would kill for your job, and they'd do it better than you." Maria's face burned with humiliation. She was aware that other customers were staring, including the kind gentleman from Table 7. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that she had covered a double shift, that she had been working without a break for 12 hours, that she was doing her best under impossible circumstances. But she knew that arguing would only make things worse. "I understand, Mr. Romano. I'll be more careful." "More careful isn't enough," Tony said, stepping closer to her. His voice was getting nastier with each word. "Maybe what you need is a reminder of what happens when you don't meet my standards." Vincent folded his newspaper and placed it neatly on the table. His movements were deliberate and calm, but there was a dangerous stillness about him now. Tony grabbed Maria by the shoulder, his fingers digging into her arm. "Maybe what you need is to understand that in my restaurant, you do things my way, or you don't do them at all." Maria winced at his grip. "Please, Mr. Romano, you're hurting me." "Hurting you?" Tony's voice rose to almost a shout. "You want to know what hurt is? Hurt is having employees who don't appreciate what they have. Hurt is trying to run a business with workers who don't care." The few remaining customers were openly staring now, some looking uncomfortable with the scene. Vincent slowly stood up from his chair, but Tony was too focused on his tirade to notice. "You know what, Maria? I'm tired of your attitude. I'm tired of your excuses. Maybe you need a lesson in respect." With that, Tony shoved Maria hard toward the kitchen doorway. She stumbled backward, her shoulder hitting the door frame with a painful thud. Her purse fell to the floor, spilling its contents across the restaurant tiles. The restaurant fell completely silent. Maria stood frozen in the doorway, her hand instinctively going to her shoulder where it throbbed with pain. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, not just from the physical hurt, but from the complete humiliation of being treated like this in front of customers. Vincent had gone completely still. He stood beside his table like a statue, his eyes fixed on Tony Romano, with an intensity that seemed to lower the temperature in the room. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried clearly across the silent restaurant. "Excuse me?" Tony turned around, still flushed with anger. When he saw Vincent standing there, his expression shifted. The well-dressed customer no longer looked like a harmless old man. There was something in his posture, in his eyes, that made Tony take an involuntary step backward. "Is there a problem, sir?" Tony asked, his voice suddenly much smaller. Vincent walked slowly across the restaurant floor, his footsteps the only sound in the oppressive silence. He stopped directly in front of Tony, close enough that the restaurant owner had to crane his neck up to meet his eyes. "I believe there is a problem," Vincent said softly. "I believe there is a very serious problem indeed." Tony's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Something in Vincent's tone made his knees feel weak, though he couldn't understand why. This was just a customer, just an old man. But the way Vincent was looking at him made Tony feel like a mouse that had just realized it was standing in front of a cat. I was just disciplining my employee, Tony stammered. This is my restaurant. I can run it however I want. Can you? Vincent asked, tilting his head slightly. Are you absolutely certain about that? Maria watched the exchange from the kitchen doorway, confused but sensing that something important was happening. The other customers had gone completely quiet, as if they too felt the shift in the atmosphere. Vincent reached into his jacket pocket, and Tony flinched slightly, but Vincent only pulled out his wallet. From it, he extracted a business card and held it out to Tony. Tony took the card with a shaking hand and looked at it. All the color drained from his face. The card was simple, elegant, with just a name and phone number. But Tony knew that name. Everyone in this part of the city knew that name. Vincent Castellano, the head of the most powerful crime family in the state. Tony's hands began to tremble as he stared at the business card. Vincent Castellano. The name that was whispered in back rooms and corner booths throughout the city. The man who controlled half the businesses in the downtown area, whose word was law in ways the police couldn't touch. And Tony had just humiliated and physically assaulted a young woman right in front of him. Mr. Castellano, Tony whispered, his voice barely audible. I didn't know. Didn't know what? Vincent asked calmly. Didn't know that treating people with basic human dignity is expected? Didn't know that putting your hands on someone who works for you is wrong? Or didn't know that I was watching? Tony's legs felt like they might give out from under him. He had heard stories about Vincent Castellano. Not just that he was powerful, but that he had his own sense of justice, that he protected people who couldn't protect themselves. That he had a particular hatred for bullies who picked on those weaker than them. Sir, please, I can explain, Tony started, but Vincent held up one hand to stop him. Let me tell you what I saw, Vincent said, his voice still quiet but carrying absolute authority. I saw a young woman who has been working for 12 hours straight without complaint. I saw someone who treats every customer with respect and kindness, even when she's exhausted. I saw a girl who reminds me of my own daughter, trying her best to make an honest living. Maria remained frozen in the kitchen doorway, afraid to move or speak. She didn't understand what was happening, but she could feel the power radiating from this man who had seemed like just another customer. And then, Vincent continued, I saw a pathetic excuse for a man berate her in public, grab her with violence, and shove her like she was a piece of garbage. In front of customers. In front of me. Tony was sweating now, despite the cool evening air. Mr. Castellano, please understand, running a restaurant is stressful. Sometimes you have to be firm with employees. I never meant any real harm. Firm. Vincent's voice dropped even lower. Grabbing a young woman by the shoulder hard enough to leave bruises is being firm? Shoving her into a wall is being firm? What's your definition of harsh discipline, Mr. Romano? The way Vincent said his name made Tony realize that this wasn't a coincidence. Vincent Castellano hadn't just stumbled into his restaurant. He had come here specifically, which meant someone had told him about Tony's behavior. Who told you? Tony asked desperately. Who complained about me? Vincent smiled. But it wasn't a warm expression. You think someone had to complain? Tony, you run a business in my neighborhood. Did you really think your reputation for bullying employees wouldn't reach my ears eventually? Maria listened in growing amazement. This customer had known about Tony's behavior toward his staff? How many people knew that Tony regularly humiliated and mistreated his workers? I make it my business to know how people in my community treat each other, Vincent continued, especially how they treat young women who are just trying to earn a decent living. You see, I have 3 daughters, Tony. 3 beautiful, hard-working daughters. And the thought of someone treating any of them the way you just treated Maria makes me very, very angry. The few remaining customers in the restaurant had been silently gathering their belongings and leaving. They could sense the danger in the air, even if they didn't understand its source. Soon, only Vincent, Tony, and Maria remained in the restaurant. "Please," Tony said, his voice cracking. "What do you want from me? I'll do anything." "Anything?" Vincent repeated thoughtfully. "That's a dangerous word to use with a man like me, Tony. Are you sure you mean anything?" Tony nodded frantically, sweat beading on his forehead. Vincent walked over to where Maria stood in the kitchen doorway. She looked up at him with wide, confused eyes. "Maria, my dear," he said gently, his tone completely different from the one he had used with Tony. "Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" Maria touched her shoulder where Tony had grabbed her. It was tender and would probably bruise, but nothing seemed broken. "I think I'm okay," she said softly. "Good. Tell me, how long have you worked here?" 3 years, sir." 3 years of this treatment? Maria glanced nervously at Tony, who was watching the conversation with growing horror. "Sometimes Mr. Romano gets stressed," she said diplomatically. "I'm not asking about his stress levels," Vincent said firmly but kindly. "I'm asking if he has put his hands on you before tonight." Maria hesitated. The truth was that Tony had grabbed her arm or shoulder several times when he was angry. He had never hit her, but he had certainly used physical intimidation. But admitting that now felt dangerous, like she was signing Tony's death warrant. Vincent seemed to read her thoughts. "You're not going to get anyone in trouble by telling the truth, Maria, but lying to protect someone who doesn't deserve protection is only going to allow him to hurt you or someone else again." Maria took a deep breath. "Yes, sir. He has grabbed me before, and he's done it to other waitresses too. Most of them quit because of it." Vincent nodded slowly, then turned back to Tony. "Did you hear that, Tony? Most of your employees quit because you can't keep your hands to yourself. That's not stress management. That's assault." "It's not assault," Tony protested weakly. "I never really hurt anyone. I get frustrated when people don't do their jobs right." "You get frustrated," Vincent repeated. "And you think that gives you the right to put your hands on people who work for you? People who depend on their jobs to survive? People who can't fight back because they need the paycheck?" Tony opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. When Vincent put it like that, his behavior sounded exactly as bad as it was. "Let me explain something to you, Tony," Vincent said, walking slowly around the restaurant as he spoke. "There are rules in this world. Some of them are written down in law books. Others are written in the hearts of decent people. One of those rules is that you don't hurt people who can't defend themselves. You don't use your power to intimidate those who have less power than you do." Vincent picked up one of the salt shakers from a nearby table, the same salt shakers that Tony had criticized Maria for not refilling. He examined it thoughtfully. "Another rule," Vincent continued, "is that when you see someone breaking the first rule, you do something about it. You don't just walk away and pretend it didn't happen. You take action." Tony was backing slowly toward the cash register, as if the counter could provide some protection. "Mr. Castellano, please. I understand I made a mistake. It won't happen again. I swear it won't happen again." "Oh, I know it won't happen again," Vincent said calmly. "The question is how we're going to make sure of that." Vincent set the salt shaker down and walked over to Tony. Despite being in his 60s, Vincent was taller and broader than the restaurant owner, and years of commanding respect had given him a presence that filled the room. "Here's what's going to happen, Tony," Vincent said. "First, you're going to apologize to Maria. A real apology. Not some half-hearted excuse about being stressed or frustrated. A genuine apology for putting your hands on her and humiliating her in public." Tony looked over at Maria, who was still standing uncertainly by the kitchen door. His pride warred with his terror, and terror won. "Maria," he said, his voice shaking. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I grabbed you and pushed you. I'm sorry I yelled at you in front of customers. You didn't deserve that treatment. Maria nodded quietly, not trusting herself to speak. Second, Vincent continued, you're going to give Maria a raise. A significant one. She's been working here for 3 years, putting up with your behavior, doing the work of 2 people. She deserves to be compensated fairly. How much? Tony asked weakly. Double her current wage, Vincent said without hesitation. Tony's eyes widened. Double? But I can't afford to. You can't afford not to, Vincent interrupted. Trust me on that. Third, Vincent said, beginning to pace again, you're going to treat all your employees with respect from now on. No more grabbing, no more shoving, no more public humiliation. If you have a problem with someone's work performance, you discuss it privately and professionally. Tony nodded frantically. Yes, absolutely. I can do that. Fourth, Vincent said, you're going to hire additional staff so that no one has to work 12-hour shifts anymore. People make mistakes when they're exhausted. They also get hurt when they're tired and trying to move too fast. Vincent stopped pacing and looked directly at Tony. And finally, you're going to remember that I know where you work, where you live, and how you treat people. If I hear even a whisper that you've gone back to your old ways, we're going to have another conversation. And I guarantee you won't enjoy that conversation nearly as much as you've enjoyed this one. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Tony understood completely. Vincent Castellano had just put him on notice. One more incident, one more report of him mistreating an employee, and the consequences would be far worse than losing money. Do we understand each other, Tony? Yes, sir, Mr. Castellano. We understand each other perfectly. Vincent nodded and turned back to Maria. Now then, my dear, I believe you were about to leave for the evening. Please, allow me to drive you home. It's late, and you shouldn't be walking alone at this hour. Maria looked uncertain. This man had just saved her from Tony's abuse. But he was obviously someone important and possibly dangerous. Getting in a car with him seemed like it might be trading one risky situation for another. Vincent seemed to sense her hesitation. I understand your concern. Perhaps I could call you a taxi instead, at my expense, of course. That's very kind of you, sir, but I can manage. I'm sure you can, Vincent said with a gentle smile. But sometimes accepting help isn't about whether you can manage on your own. Sometimes it's about letting people do the right thing. Maria considered this. After 3 years of working for someone who made her feel worthless and powerless, the idea of being treated with genuine kindness was almost overwhelming. A taxi would be very nice, she said finally. Thank you. Vincent pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Within minutes, he had arranged for a car to pick Maria up and take her home. The driver will wait for you while you get your things together, Vincent told her. Take your time. Maria gathered her purse and the belongings that had spilled out when Tony pushed her. As she bent to pick up her scattered items, Vincent knelt down to help her. When their eyes met, she saw something in his expression that she hadn't expected, genuine concern for her well-being. Are you really okay? He asked quietly. Not just physically, but emotionally? What happened tonight was wrong, and it's natural to feel shaken up. I think I'll be okay, Maria said. I'm still trying to understand what just happened. Vincent stood up and helped her to her feet. What happened is that a bully learned there are consequences for his actions. What happened is that you're safe now, and you're going to be treated better from now on. As they walked toward the door, Maria turned back to look at Tony, who was standing behind the counter like a statue. She felt a mix of emotions, relief, gratitude, and a small measure of satisfaction that someone had finally stood up to him. But she also felt a lingering worry. What would tomorrow bring? Would Tony resent her for what had happened? Would he find ways to make her life difficult that Vincent wouldn't see? Vincent seemed to read her thoughts again. "Don't worry about tomorrow," he said softly. "Tony knows that his behavior will be watched from now on, and I'll be checking in periodically to make sure everything is going well." The taxi pulled up outside the restaurant, and Vincent walked Maria to the car. As she got in, he handed her a business card. "If you ever have any problems at work," he said, "any problems at all, you call that number. Don't hesitate. Don't try to handle it yourself. Just call." Maria took the card and looked at it. It was the same elegant card he had shown Tony, with just a name and number. But to her, it felt like a lifeline. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." "You don't need to repay anything," Vincent replied. "Just live your life with dignity and don't let anyone treat you as less than you deserve." As the taxi pulled away, Maria watched through the rear window as Vincent walked back into the restaurant. She wondered what else he might say to Tony Romano, and found herself hoping that Tony was getting a more thorough education in how to treat people properly. 3 months later, Romano's Italian restaurant had transformed into a completely different place. Maria arrived at work each morning with a lightness in her step that would have been impossible during the Tony Romano reign of terror. The restaurant was busier than ever, the staff was happy, and the atmosphere had shifted from tense and hostile to warm and welcoming. True to Vincent's demands, Tony had doubled Maria's wages and hired 2 additional staff members. Maria now worked reasonable 8-hour shifts instead of the grueling 12-hour marathons that had left her exhausted and resentful. More importantly, Tony had completely changed his management style. Gone were the shouting matches, the public humiliations, and the physical intimidation. In their place was a man who seemed to have discovered that treating employees with respect actually made the restaurant run better. Maria was wiping down tables after the lunch rush when she heard the familiar voice behind her. "Good afternoon, Maria. How are things going?" She turned to see Vincent Castellano entering the restaurant, impeccably dressed as always in a charcoal gray suit. Over the past 3 months, he had become a regular customer, stopping by every few weeks to enjoy a meal and observe how the restaurant was being run. "Mr. Castellano," Maria smiled genuinely, "everything is going wonderfully. Let me get you your usual table." Vincent had claimed the same corner table where he had sat on that fateful night 3 months ago. It gave him a clear view of the entire restaurant and the kitchen entrance. Maria had come to realize that Vincent chose his seat strategically, positioning himself where he could see everything that was happening. As she led him to his table, Maria noticed how the entire restaurant seemed to straighten up slightly when Vincent entered, not out of fear, but out of respect. Even Tony emerged from the kitchen with a dish towel in his hands and a genuine smile on his face. "Mr. Castellano, welcome back," Tony said, approaching the table. "Can I get you started with some wine? We just received excellent Chianti from a vineyard in Tuscany." "That sounds perfect, Tony," Vincent replied graciously. "And please, bring me your recommendations for lunch. I trust your judgment." Maria watched this exchange with amazement. The transformation in Tony's demeanor around Vincent was remarkable. But it wasn't just fear-based submission. Over the weeks, she had seen Tony actually begin to take pride in providing good service, in running a restaurant that Vincent would approve of. As Tony went to get the wine, Vincent gestured for Maria to sit down for a moment. "Tell me honestly," he said, lowering his voice. "How are things really going? Is Tony maintaining the changes we discussed?" Maria glanced around to make sure they wouldn't be overheard. "It's like working in a completely different place," she said. "He hasn't raised his voice to anyone in weeks. When he has feedback about our work, he pulls us aside privately and speaks to us respectfully. And he hired Sarah and Miguel, so none of us are overwhelmed anymore." "And the other staff members? How are they adjusting?" "They can hardly believe it," Maria laughed. "Carmen, who's been here longer than me, keeps waiting for him to explode and go back to his old ways. but it's been 3 months now and he's been consistently different. Vincent nodded with satisfaction. Good. Sometimes people just need the right motivation to discover their better nature. Tony returned with the wine and a plate of antipasto. Our chef's special selection, he said proudly. And I took the liberty of starting your lunch. We're making osso buco today with risotto Milanese. I think you'll enjoy it. I'm sure I will, Vincent replied. Tony, how is business these days? Tony's face lit up. Better than ever, actually. Word has gotten around that we're treating customers and staff better, and we're getting new people every week. Our online reviews have improved dramatically. Turns out that happy employees make for better service, and better service brings in more customers. Imagine that, Vincent said with a slight smile. Who would have thought that treating people well could be good for business? Tony had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I know I was doing things wrong before, Mr. Castellano. I was so focused on cutting costs and pushing people to work harder that I forgot the most important thing. People work better when they feel respected. It's never too late to learn that lesson, Vincent said. And you've learned it well. As Tony walked away, beaming with pride, Maria shook her head in wonder. I still can't believe the change in him. It's like he's a completely different person. He's the same person, Vincent corrected gently. He just needed to understand that his old way of doing things wasn't acceptable anymore. Sometimes people need clear boundaries and consequences before they're motivated to change. Maria was quiet for a moment, then looked directly at Vincent. Can I ask you something? Of course. That night, 3 months ago, you didn't just happen to be here, did you? You came here specifically because you knew how Tony was treating his employees. Vincent sipped his wine thoughtfully. You're very perceptive, Maria. You're right. I had heard reports about the working conditions here. I wanted to see for myself what was happening. But why did you care? I mean, there must be dozens of businesses in the neighborhood. You can't personally investigate every workplace complaint. Vincent set down his wine glass and looked at her seriously. You're right that I can't investigate every complaint, but there are certain types of behavior that I won't tolerate in my community. Bullying, intimidation, especially of young women who are just trying to make an honest living. That crosses a line for me. Because of your daughters? Partly because of my daughters, Vincent admitted, but also because I believe that how we treat the most vulnerable people in our community says everything about who we are as human beings. You were vulnerable that night, Maria. You needed this job. You couldn't fight back. And Tony was taking advantage of that power imbalance. Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. You changed my life, she said quietly. Not just the job situation, but you showed me that I deserve to be treated with respect. For 3 years, I had started to believe that Tony was right, that I wasn't good enough, that I should be grateful for whatever treatment I got. Vincent's expression grew serious. Listen to me carefully, Maria. You are a hard-working, intelligent, kind young woman. You deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, not just at work, but everywhere in your life. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Vincent's lunch. Tony personally brought the plate to the table, clearly proud of the presentation. Osso buco made with my grandmother's recipe, Tony announced. The meat has been braising for 4 hours, and the risotto is made with real saffron. Vincent cut a piece of the meat and tasted it thoughtfully. Excellent, he said with genuine appreciation. Your grandmother would be proud. Tony practically glowed with the compliment. Thank you, sir. That means a lot coming from you. After Tony left, Vincent continued eating while observing the restaurant. Maria returned to her duties but found herself stealing glances at her unexpected protector. She had learned bits and pieces about Vincent over the past few months. The other staff members whispered about him, calling him everything from a guardian angel to a dangerous man who should be feared. Maria had come to her own conclusion. He was both. During a lull in the afternoon, Maria brought Vincent a fresh cup of coffee. "Mr. Castellano, can I tell you something?" "Always." "I've been taking night classes at the community college," she said. "Business administration. I'm hoping to eventually open my own restaurant someday." Vincent's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "That's wonderful news, Maria. What gave you the motivation to pursue that dream?" Maria thought about how to answer. "Working here, especially after the changes, made me realize that I have good instincts about how to treat people and run a business. And meeting you made me realize that I don't have to settle for just surviving. I can actually build something for myself." "You absolutely can," Vincent said firmly. "And when you're ready to take that step, I want you to know that you have my support. Whether that's advice about business plans, connections with suppliers, or help finding the right location, you can count on me." Maria felt overwhelmed by his generosity. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because investing in good people is always worthwhile," Vincent replied. "Because you remind me that there are still decent, hard-working people in the world who deserve a chance to succeed. And because I believe you'll run your restaurant the right way, treating your employees with the respect they deserve." As the afternoon wore on, Maria watched Vincent interact with other customers and staff members. She noticed how he remembered details about people's lives, asked about their families, and always treated everyone with genuine kindness and respect. It occurred to her that the qualities that made him powerful in his business also made him a force for good in situations like hers. When it came time for Vincent to leave, he called Maria over to his table. "I have something for you," he said, handing her an envelope. "What is this?" "Information about a scholarship program for people in the food service industry who want to pursue business education," Vincent explained. "It covers tuition, books, and provides a small stipend for living expenses. I think you'd be a perfect candidate." Maria opened the envelope and scanned the documents inside. It was indeed a scholarship program, and it was incredibly generous. "Mr. Castellano, this is amazing. But how did you know about it?" Vincent smiled mysteriously. "Let's just say I believe in supporting people who want to better themselves. The application deadline is next month. I strongly encourage you to apply." "I will," Maria said, clutching the envelope. "I absolutely will." As Vincent prepared to leave, Tony approached with the check. Vincent waved it away. "Consider it an investment in your continued excellent service," he said. "Keep treating your people well, Tony. It's good for everyone." Tony nodded earnestly. "I will, Mr. Castellano, I promise." Vincent stood and adjusted his jacket. "Maria, walk with me to the door." As they moved toward the entrance, Vincent spoke quietly. "I'm proud of you. Not just for pursuing your education, but for the way you've handled everything that's happened. You could have been bitter about the way Tony treated you. Instead, you've chosen to focus on building a better future for yourself." "I learned that from watching you," Maria said. "You could have just punished Tony and walked away. Instead, you took the time to make sure the situation actually improved for everyone." "That's the difference between revenge and justice," Vincent said. "Revenge is about making yourself feel better. Justice is about making things right for everyone involved." As they reached the door, Vincent paused and looked back at the restaurant. The dining room was full of customers enjoying their meals. The staff was moving efficiently and cheerfully through their duties. Tony was in the kitchen, working alongside his cooks instead of barking orders from behind the counter. "You know," Vincent said thoughtfully, "I think this place serves better food now than it did 3 months ago." "Why do you think that is?" Maria asked. "Because food tastes better when it's prepared by people who feel valued and respected," Vincent replied. "When the staff is happy, when they take pride in their work, it shows up in everything they do. Vincent extended his hand to Maria, and she shook it firmly. "Remember what I told you about deserving respect, Maria. Don't ever forget that lesson." "I won't," she promised. "And Mr. Castellano, thank you for everything." Vincent nodded and walked out into the afternoon sunshine. As Maria watched him go, she realized that her life had been divided into two distinct periods: before that night 3 months ago, and after. The scared, exhausted girl who had been shoved into a kitchen doorway was gone. In her place stood a confident young woman with dreams, goals, and the unshakable knowledge that she deserved to be treated well. She looked down at the scholarship application in her hands, then back at the bustling restaurant where she worked. Tony emerged from the kitchen and gave her a genuine smile. "Everything okay, Maria?" he asked. "Everything is perfect," she replied. And for the first time in years, she meant it completely. 6 months later, Maria received notification that she had been awarded the scholarship. A year after that, she graduated with honors from her business program. And 2 years after the night Vincent Castellano first walked into Romano's Italian restaurant, Maria opened her own small cafe 3 blocks away. Vincent was her first customer, and he left her a note with his payment that read, "Congratulations on building something beautiful. Your employees are lucky to work for someone who understands the value of treating people right." But that, as they say, is another story entirely.